Welcome to The Real Debrief, the show where we dive deep into the world of film production, exploring the genres you love, the projects making waves, and the trends shaping the industry. We're here to give you a 360-degree review for entertainment professionals. So grab your popcorn and get ready for some expert insights. And, well, the occasional bed joke from Talen. It's The Real Debrief. Now your hosts, Talen and Lisa.
Oh, hey everyone, didn't see you there. Welcome back to another episode of the show. I'm Talen, and as always, I'm joined by my incredible co-host, Lisa.
Hi, Talen. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited for today's conversation. We're diving deep into Quentin Dupieux's latest film, Daaaaali, a movie that is as bizarre and surreal as you'd expect from a film about Salvador Dalí. Honestly, it's hard to put into words just how outlandish and inventive this movie is, but we're gonna try.
That's right, and Dupieux is no stranger to this kind of wild, absurdist filmmaking. For those unfamiliar with his work, he's the director behind movies like Rubber, the film about a sentient killer tire, and Deerskin, where a man becomes obsessed with his fringed leather jacket to the point of insanity. Dupieux has this knack for blending absurdity with humor in a way that's both unsettling and hilarious. And Daaaaali is no different. It's a tribute to the surrealist artist Salvador Dalí. But it's also much more than that. It's a mind-bending cinematic experience.
Exactly, Talen. I think Daaaaali works on multiple levels. It's a visual tribute to Salvador Dalí's world of melting clocks and dreamscapes, but it's also a commentary on art, time, and the nature of identity itself. The movie starts with this recreation of Dalí's famous painting, Necrophiliac Fountain Flowing from a Grand Piano, which immediately sets the tone for what's to come. From that first shot, you know you're not in for a traditional biopic or straightforward narrative.
Abso-freaking-lutely. That opening shot is so striking. Dupieux doesn't hold back. The painting comes to life, and suddenly we're thrust into this chaotic, dreamlike world where logic is thrown out the window. And it's not just the visuals that are surreal. The entire structure of the film follows this bizarre, non-linear dream logic. It's almost as if Dupieux is inviting us into Dalí's mind, and nothing follows a straight path. Characters appear and disappear, scenes rewind and play out backward, and time itself bends and stretches.
And then there's the genius casting of Dalí. Instead of having one actor portray Dalí throughout the film, Dupieux does something really interesting. He has multiple actors play the role, often within the same scene. You'll have Edouard Baird playing Dalí in one moment, and then Jonathan Cohen or Pio Marmaille will suddenly take over the role in the middle of a scene without any explanation. It's completely disorienting, but it's also brilliant because it speaks to Dalí's own multifaceted personality. Dalí was never just one person. He was an artist, a provocateur, a self-promoter, and an enigma. And by having different actors play him, Dupieux captures that fluidity.
Ah, that is such a great point, Lisa. Dalí was a walking contradiction in so many ways, and Dupieux really leans into that by using multiple actors. He's not just showing us different stages in Dalí's life, he's showing us how Dalí himself could be multiple things at once. I mean, he could be the serious, introspective artist, and then he could turn around and be the flamboyant showman who loved to shock and confuse people. It's almost as if Dupieux is trying to say, Dalí couldn't be contained by one person, so why should one actor be enough to portray him?
Exactly. And I love how this idea of multiple identities isn't just confined to Dalí himself. The film plays with identity in all sorts of ways. Judith, played by Anaïs de Moussier, is a young journalist who's sent to interview Dalí, but even her role in the film is fluid. She starts out as this wide-eyed, inexperienced reporter, but as the film progresses, her character becomes more complex. She's trying to get a grasp on who Dalí really is, but at the same time, she's trying to figure out who she is in relation to him. There's this scene where she looks into a mirror, and suddenly she's not sure if she's looking at herself or if she's seeing Dalí's reflection. It's such a clever way to blur the lines between observer and subject.
I loved that scene. It's such a great visual representation of the way Dalí's persona could consume everything around him. Judith, in her attempt to understand Dalí, starts to lose her own sense of self. And that's something Dupieux plays with throughout the film. This idea that Dalí's larger-than-life persona can't just be observed from the outside. I mean, if you try to get too close, you are at risk of being absorbed into his world of madness and surrealism.
And speaking of surrealism, we have to talk about the film's score. The music, composed by Thomas Bangalter from Daft Punk, is absolutely perfect for this film. It's a playful acoustic score that feels light and whimsical, but there's also something slightly off-kilter about it. It keeps you on your toes, much like the visuals do. The music kind of dances around the scenes in a way that mirrors the absurdity on screen.
Yes, the score is fantastic. Bangalter really captures that sense of playful chaos. It's like the music is part of the joke, part of the just absurdity. You're watching these ridiculous scenes unfold, and then the music just skips along as if it's totally in on the joke. It's not heavy or dramatic, it's light and bouncy, which fits perfectly with Dupieux's style. He never takes himself too seriously, and that's what makes his films so enjoyable.
That's what I love about Dupieux. He's a filmmaker who isn't afraid to be completely ridiculous, but at the same time, there's always something deeper going on beneath the surface. Yes, Dalí is absurd and funny, but it's also a meditation on art, time, and identity. The film is constantly playing with our expectations of what a biopic should be, and it's also asking some big questions about the nature of art itself. What is art? Is it something that can be captured in a straightforward narrative, or is it something that defies explanation and categorization?
Oh, exactly. And I think that's where Dupieux's surrealist approach really shines. He's not interested in giving us a traditional narrative about Dalí's life. He is interested in capturing the spirit of Dalí's work. And that's why the film feels so disjointed and chaotic. It's as if Dupieux is saying, if you want to understand Dalí, you can't do it through a linear story. You have to embrace the madness, the absurdity, the dream logic. And honestly, that's what makes this film so fun. It's not about understanding Dalí in a conventional sense. It's about experiencing the world as he might have seen it.
And let's be honest, Dalí's world was anything but conventional. He was an artist who reveled in contradiction, in creating images that confused and disturbed people. Dupieux captures that so well. There are moments in the film where you don't know what's real and what's imagined. Is Judith really interviewing Dalí, or is she dreaming? Is Dalí even alive in this film, or are we just seeing a projection of him from Judith's mind? The lines between reality and fantasy are completely blurred, and that's exactly what makes the film so engaging.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about how the film deals with time, too. Time is so fluid in this movie, just like it was in Dalí's paintings. We see scenes that are played in reverse. We see moments where the actors switch places in the middle of a scene, and we see scenes that seem to take place outside of time altogether. It's as if Dupieux is playing with the idea that time, like identity, it's something that can't be pinned down. It's all part of the surrealist tradition, rejecting the idea that time has to move in a straight line or that it even has to follow a logical progression.
That's such a great point, Talen. The film's treatment of time is one of its most interesting aspects. It's almost as if Dupieux is saying that time doesn't matter in this world. We're so used to films that have a clear beginning, middle, and end, but Dalí throws all of that out the window. It's a series of moments, of images, of ideas that flow into one another without any concern for traditional narrative structure. And that's what makes it so refreshing. It's not trying to fit into any mold. It's just doing its own thing, and it's inviting the audience to come along for the ride.
Oh, and it is such a wild ride. But I do have to admit, there were a few moments where the film's constant trickery and non-linear structure started to feel a little tiresome. I mean, I think that's one of the risks with a film like this. Dupieux is so committed to keeping the audience off balance that at times it feels like he's throwing every surreal trick in the book at us. And, it can get a bit overwhelming. There were moments where I found myself wanting to just catch my breath and let the film slow down for a second, but it doesn't really give you that space.
I totally get that. And I think that's a common critique with Dupieux's films. He's constantly pushing the boundary of what's absurd and what's possible in cinema. And while that's part of his charm, it can also be exhausting. There's only so much disorientation the audience can handle before it starts to feel like chaos for chaos's sake. I wonder if that's part of the point, though. Salvador Dalí himself wasn't exactly concerned with making people feel comfortable with his art.
Right, and in that way, that's what makes Daaaaali so authentic to Dalí's spirit. It's not meant to be a film that you can easily digest in one sitting. It's designed to challenge you, to make you feel a little uncomfortable and force you to question what you're seeing. But I think where the film really succeeds is in capturing the essence of what made Dalí such a fascinating figure. He was someone who reveled in confusion and contradiction and in forcing people to see the world through a different lens. Dupieux is doing the same thing here. I mean, he's making us look at the film and ask ourselves, what is this? And does it even matter if we understand it?
Exactly. I think the film is at its best when it's embracing that sense of confusion and playfulness. There's a moment toward the middle of the film where Judith is interviewing Dalí, or one of the versions of Dalí anyway, and he suddenly starts speaking in a completely different language. Judith tries to keep up, but then Dalí starts laughing and switches back to French, and then the whole scene just dissolves into absurdity. It's moments like that where you realize that Dupieux isn't interested in giving us the answers. He's interested in making us laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of it all.
Yeah, no, that scene was hilarious. And it is a perfect example of how Dupieux uses humor to disarm the audience. I mean, just when you think you might be on the verge of understanding something, he pulls the rug out from under you with a joke or a surreal twist. It's like he's saying, don't take this too seriously. This is all just a game. And in that sense, I think Dupieux is doing something really interesting with the biopic genre. He's taking all the seriousness and reverence that usually comes with films about famous figures and turning it on its head. He's reminding us that even icons like Dalí were human, and their lives were just as messy and strange as everyone else's.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that sets Dalí apart from other films about artists. It's not trying to put Dalí on a pedestal. It's embracing his weirdness, his contradictions, and his playfulness. There's a real sense of joy in the way that Dupieux approaches Dalí's life. It's almost as if he's saying, look at how absurd and wonderful this man was. Let's celebrate that. And in doing so, the film becomes a kind of tribute, not just to Dalí, but to the entire surrealist movement.
Yes. And speaking of the surrealist movement, I think it's important to mention the influence of Luis Buñuel on his films as well. Buñuel is one of Dalí's closest collaborators in the early days, and you can feel his presence throughout Dalí. Not just in the dreamlike structure, but in the way Dupieux plays with reality and illusion. And there's a scene that feels like a direct nod to Buñuel's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, where Judith is trying to interview Dalí in a fancy restaurant, but every time she asks a question, the scene abruptly changes to something completely unrelated. It's disorienting, but it's also a brilliant commentary on how Dalí refused to be pinned down by anyone, even his own biographers.
Ah, I love that scene. It's so Buñuelesque. With the way it plays with time and space, it's also a great example of how Dupieux raises the absurd to make a point. Judith, as the journalist, represents all of us trying to understand Dalí, trying to get to the heart of who he is and what makes him tick. But every time she gets close, the film pulls her away, as if to say, you'll never fully understand Dalí, because he doesn't want to be understood. He wants to remain an enigma.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's what makes this film so fascinating. It's not just about Dalí, the artist. It's about Dalí, the myth. Dalí, the trickster. I mean, he's constantly playing with people's perceptions of him. And Dupieux captures that perfectly. There's this sense through the film that Dalí is always one step ahead of everyone else, always playing a game that no one else can quite grasp. And in that way, Dupieux has made a film that's not just about Dalí. It's a film that is Dalí. It's chaotic, it's confusing, and it is endlessly entertaining.
I love that, Talen. A film that is Dalí. That's such a great way to put it. And I think that's what makes Dalí so unique. It's not just a biopic about an artist. It's a piece of art in and of itself. Dupieux has created something that feels like it could have come directly from Dalí's imagination, and that's no small feat. It's a film that refuses to be confined by traditional storytelling, just like Dalí refused to be confined by the rules of traditional art.
Exactly. And I think that's why Dalí will resonate with people who appreciate not just Dalí's work, but surrealism as a whole. It's a film that celebrates the weird, the nonsensical, and the dreamlike. And in a world that often feels overly structured and rigid, there's something incredibly freeing about that. Dupieux is inviting us to let go of our need for answers and just enjoy the ride. And honestly, that's a refreshing perspective in today's world of formulaic storytelling.
Yes, and I think that's why Dupieux's work in general has gained such a cult following. He's not interested in playing by the rules, and that's what makes him so unpredictable and fun to watch. You never know what you're going to get with a Dupieux film, and Dalí is no exception. It's a film that challenges you, confuses you, and makes you laugh, all at the same time. I think that's exactly what Dalí would have wanted.
I could agree more, Lisa, but I won't. Sorry. It's a film that's as playful as it is profound, as confusing as it is entertaining, and while it may not be for everyone, I think fans of surrealism, art, and experimental cinema are going to absolutely love it. I mean, it's a wild ride from start to finish, and I think that's exactly what Dupieux was going for.
Definitely. So if you're a fan of Salvador Dalí, or if you just enjoy films that push the boundaries of what cinema can be, Dalí is a must-watch. It's a film that will make you laugh, scratch your head, and leave you thinking about it long after the credits roll. It's one of those rare films that truly feels like a work of art in its own right.
Yeah, well said, Lisa. And with that, I think we've covered just about everything we can about Dalí, without giving too much away, of course. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. It's one of those films that you have to experience for yourself to truly understand it. Or not understand it, as the case may be.
Exactly, Talen. It's all about the experience. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Dalí and the mind of Quentin Dupieux. Be sure to join us next time for more film discussions, and as always, stay curious and open to the weird and wonderful.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
This has been The Real Debrief. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, like, rate, and review. We'll see you soon on The Real Debrief.